Hello everyone. Before we begin, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and tell me, where are you listening from? And what time is it for you? Now, let me tell you a story. My name is Daniel Smoke. I'm a forest surveyor, part of a small team contracted by the state to inspect and document areas in Nicollet National Forest, northern Wisconsin. If you're unfamiliar, it's one of those places that feels older than time itself. Miles upon miles of pine, birch, and spruce stitched together with muddy logging trails and moss-covered rock outcroppings. Beautiful, sure, but silent in a way that makes you feel like you're trespassing. This happened to me in the fall of 2002, and I've never been able to shake it, not just the memory, but the feeling. The raw, instinctive knowledge that something was watching me and wanted me gone. It started when my partner, Jesse, called out sick. We'd been working a grid about 5 miles off County Road F, charting beetle infestations. With Jesse down, I volunteered to wrap up the last 3 plots solo. I'd done it before. Hell, half the time I preferred the solitude. Gave me a break from the noise of life. Just me, the woods, and the sound of my boots in the underbrush. I signed out the ATV and gear from the ranger station and headed out at sunrise. It was a chilly morning, that kind of damp cold that sits in your joints and tells you winter's coming. The sky was steel gray, the wind cutting low through the trees. I reached the drop point by 7:30, parked the ATV off trail, and hiked in about 1.5 miles with my pack, clipboard, and GPS. At first, everything was normal, silent, still, just the usual rustle of squirrels and the occasional far-off bird call. But about an hour in, I noticed it. The forest got quiet, not in a peaceful way, in a wrong way, like something was waiting. The air went still, no wind, no birds. Even the squirrels were gone. I tried to brush it off as paranoia, just the creeping stillness of early autumn. But the further I hiked into Plot 27, the heavier it felt. Then I started seeing the trees. They were marked, claw marks. At first I thought maybe a bear, but these weren't right. The spacing was too wide, the gouges too deep. 5 slashes, clean, angled in a way that suggested intent. Not random swipes like whatever made them had hands, not paws. I took photos, logged it, and moved on. I'd seen strange stuff before. This was Wisconsin. It's wild land, but my skin was crawling. Around noon, I stopped for lunch at a rocky outcrop near the southern edge of the grid. I remember biting into my sandwich and catching a scent, wet fur and copper, like blood. It hit hard, sudden, and I stood up fast, looking around. That's when I saw it. About 40 yards down the slope, half concealed in shadow, something was standing between the trees. I thought it was a bear at first, tall, hulking, but then it shifted, stepped forward, and I saw the legs. It was walking upright, massive, at least 8 feet tall, with a long torso, bent legs like a dog's, and arms, actual arms, long and corded with muscle, hanging almost to its knees. The fur was dark gray, thick, and matted. Its head looked wrong, like a German shepherd's, but stretched, exaggerated. And the eyes, God, the eyes, they glowed amber, even in daylight, locked straight on me, like it had known I'd be here all along. I didn't move. I couldn't. The thing didn't growl, didn't charge, it just tilted its head slow, curious. like it was studying me. Then it stepped behind the trees and vanished. I don't know how long I stood there before I finally moved. I packed everything in seconds, my hands shaking so bad I dropped my compass twice. I left markers to find my way back and booked it toward the ATV. It followed me. I didn't see it again, but I heard it, branches cracking, that low, guttural breathing just out of sight. Every time I stopped, it stopped. Every time I turned, the woods behind me were empty. By the time I reached the ATV, my legs were cramping from the tension. I gunned it without even putting my helmet back on. I didn't stop until I hit the station. I didn't report it. What could I say? That I saw a walking wolf in the woods? They'd laugh, blame stress, say I was sleep-deprived. I told them I'd seen signs of an aggressive bear and requested a different grid for the next few weeks. But I couldn't stay away from the thought of it. I started digging. Forums, old newspaper clippings. That's when I found the term, Dogman. It picked people. I started dreaming about it, waking up with the scent of wet fur in my nose, swearing I heard that low panting outside my bedroom window. I moved 3 months later, took a job in Duluth. Different trees, different land, but even now I won't go into the woods alone. I won't hike unarmed. And I haven't been back to Nicolette since. Because something's in those trees, something that isn't supposed to exist, and I think it remembers me. My name's Caleb Strong, and I worked for 15 years as a wildlife biologist for the state of West Virginia. Most of that time was spent in the Monongahela National Forest, thousands of acres of dense forest, jagged ridgelines, and old coal roads winding through the mountains like forgotten veins. I've cataloged bobcats, tracked black bears, even stared down a pack of coyotes. I don't scare easy, but what happened to me on Coal Ridge Trail in 2010, it broke something inside me. I'm not telling this for attention. I don't care if anyone believes me. I just need to say it out loud because I still wake up some nights gasping for air, the smell of wet pine and rot stuck in my nose. It was early October, right as the leaves started turning. I'd been sent out to investigate a string of livestock disappearances near a rural hollow just outside Greenbrier County. Locals blamed coyotes, but the kills were too clean. No drag marks, no mess, just gone. I'd heard of Coal Ridge before. Old-timers told stories about strange sightings, shadows in the trees, howling that sounded too human. One even claimed something chased his mule team off a cliff in the 60s. Folklore, I thought. Backwoods ghost stories. Still, I brought my .45. I parked my truck at the trailhead just after sunrise. It was colder than usual, crisp and still, the kind of air that makes sound travel. I hiked 3 miles up an old mining trail. Overgrown but still walkable. Trees lined the path, so thick the sky barely peeked through. Around mid-morning, I found a carcass. A deer, maybe 2 days dead, but something was off. Its chest was torn open, but there were no teeth marks, no sign of struggle. The eyes had been gouged clean out. I crouched beside it, snapping photos and jotting notes, when I heard it, a sound I've never forgotten. Not a growl, not a howl. something in between, low, rumbling, and wrong. It echoed from deeper in the woods, maybe 100 yards off trail. I stood up fast, heart pounding. I should have left. Every instinct told me to backtrack and radio it in, but I was trained to investigate. So like an idiot, I followed the sound. The forest got darker the deeper I went. Pines thickened, blotting out the sun. Birds stopped singing. I couldn't even hear my own footsteps after a while, just the faint creak of branches high above. Then I found the clearing. It was a small hollow, maybe 20 feet wide. In the center, a ring of rocks surrounded a pile of bones, animal bones, mostly, but there were clothes mixed in. A torn flannel, a child's sneaker. I didn't breathe, I didn't move. Then I saw it, standing just beyond the ring of trees. It looked like a massive dog at first, long limbs covered in dark, matted fur. But it stood upright. Its legs were bent backward like a deer's, and its arms hung low, almost to its knees, ending in clawed fingers, not paws. Its head was all wrong. A long snout, pointed ears, eyes that glowed gold in the gloom. But it wasn't just the shape, it was the way it looked at me. Not like prey, not like a threat. It studied me, curious, intelligent. Then it took a step forward. My legs moved before my brain caught up. I turned and ran, stumbling through the brush, crashing through branches like a madman. I didn't care about the trail. I didn't care about the gear I dropped. I just ran. It followed. I didn't hear footsteps, just movement. Fast, deliberate, weaving through the trees like it had lived there 1,000 years. When I burst out onto the trail again, I didn't stop. My lungs burned. My heart was a war drum. But I didn't stop until I saw my truck. I peeled out, gravel flying, and didn't look in the rear view until I hit the county road. Nothing. I radioed it in as a possible bear encounter. Said I was spooked, maybe hallucinated the rest. I don't know if the station ever believed me. They didn't press it. But a week later, a family disappeared camping near the same area. Tents shredded, blood on the leaves, no bodies. Search dogs refused to enter the woods past a certain point. They just howled. One even ran back to the trucks and wouldn't come out for 2 days. After that, I refused to work in the Coal Ridge sector. Told them I had vertigo issues. They transferred me to river ecosystems. But I still think about it, especially on cold, still nights when the wind's just right. Sometimes I hear that sound again, that low, vibrating, not quite howl. My wife says it's just coyotes. I know better. I don't go into the woods alone anymore, not even to fish, because there's something out there, and it's not a bear, it's not a coyote, it's not a man in a costume. It's something old, something that's been watching for a long time, and I think sometimes it remembers me. My name's Evan Knox, and I've been a wildlife photographer for over 14 years. I've crawled through African brush to shoot lions, hung from ice-covered ledges for snow leopards, even spent 3 nights on a raft to get a single photo of a jaguar swimming across a South American river. But nothing has ever come close to what I saw last October in northern Michigan. I was freelancing for a nature publication. doing a story on disappearing wolf packs in the Upper Peninsula. They wanted intimate shots, den sites, paw prints, even a mother with her cubs if I was lucky. I'd worked with apex predators before, so I wasn't nervous, just focused. The plan was simple. 2 weeks in a remote research cabin, the DNR, used for seasonal surveys. They dropped me off by a TV and wouldn't be back until the end of the assignment. No roads, no trails, just forest. At first, it was everything I'd hoped for. The trees were painted in autumn fire, a mosaic of orange and red stretching endlessly. I'd tracked some wolf prints by the first creek bed, even got some decent night shots with the motion triggers I set up. My second night was uneventful until I checked one of my trail cams the following morning. The still frame caught something I couldn't make sense of. It was mid-frame, partially in shadow, but clearly not a deer or bear. It stood upright, shoulders too broad, arms too long. The eyes, those goddamn eyes, were glowing white in the IR flash. I stared at the grainy image, thinking maybe it was a poacher in ghillie gear, but the shape was all wrong. The knees were bent backward. I told myself it was a trick of the light. A misfire. I deleted the file, which I regret now, but I didn't want to obsess over nothing. The third night, everything changed. Around 2:30 a.m., I was reviewing long exposures on my laptop when I heard it. A low, rhythmic thudding, like something heavy walking across the forest floor. I killed the lights, listened. The sound was deliberate. Step, step, pause, step. I grabbed my camera, heart pounding, and moved toward the window, which overlooked the north clearing. I saw movement at the edge of the tree line. I raised the viewfinder, adjusted for the moonlight, and took a shot. The camera's click sounded too loud, echoing through the stillness. The figure stopped. Then it turned slowly and looked directly at the cabin. My breath caught. Through the lens, I could see it clearly now. It stood upright, easily over 8 feet. Its body was covered in thick, coarse fur, black, but patchy in spots like it had been burned. The limbs were wrong, arms hung low, ending in clawed hands that almost dragged along the ground. The face, Jesus. The snout was elongated like a wolf, but there was something horribly human in its posture. Its eyes didn't reflect, they glowed. That wasn't camera flare. It saw me, and then it smiled. Not like a dog showing teeth. This was deliberate, slow, malicious. I dropped the camera and backed away from the window. That smile, it wasn't curiosity. It was recognition. I locked the cabin door and sat with my back against it, shotgun across my lap. I hadn't brought it for wolvesome. I'd brought it for bears. Now I wasn't sure it would do anything. For hours I listened. It circled the cabin at least twice. Once, I swear, I heard it sniffing the logs near the base. Another time, there was a light tap against the glass, almost polite, like it was testing the thickness. At sunrise, it was gone. I should have called for pickup. I knew I should have, but I was proud, stupidly proud. This was my assignment. I was going to see it through. The 6th night, I made the mistake of staying out late. I'd followed fresh tracks past the creek, big tracks, bipedal. They led deeper into the woods where the trees grew tighter and older, the kind of forest that feels like it's holding its breath. Just as I was setting up a long exposure by a game trail, I heard a branch snap behind me. I turned. There was nothing, but the air shifted. You know that awful moment right before lightning strikes? That's what it felt like. The silence was pressing, unnatural. I looked through the viewfinder, scanning. That's when I saw it again. Not 20 feet away, crouched beside a tree like it had been there all along. It didn't charge. It didn't growl. It just stood slowly, like it wanted me to watch the whole thing. This time I saw more. The way its shoulder blades shifted beneath the skin. The way its chest rose and fell with calm, controlled breaths. Its claws were longer than my fingers, its teeth yellow and thick like they hadn't evolved for chewing, only tearing. I raised my camera. Reflex. It moved, not ran, moved. In an instant it was inches from me. I screamed, stumbling backward into the mud, dropping everything. It crouched again, tilting its head, that god-awful grin returning like it was enjoying this. Then, just like before, it turned and disappeared into the trees. I don't remember the hike back to the cabin. I just remember locking the door and not sleeping. I was extracted the next morning. I told them the batteries on my set phone died early, that I was done with the assignment. They didn't ask many questions. I've since reviewed the images. The one I snapped just before it moved, blurry, underexposed, but it's there. You can see the silhouette, the claws, the grin. Most people who look at it say it's a bear, but they're wrong. It knew I was there. It let me live. It wanted me to remember it. I haven't gone back to the woods since. But some nights when the wind howls outside my apartment and the shadows seem just a little too still, I think about that grin, that thing, and I wonder how many others it's shown itself to, and why it chose me. People think being a sheriff's deputy in rural Texas is just handing out speeding tickets and checking up on rowdy teens drinking behind barns. Sometimes it is, but sometimes it's worse. Way worse. My name's Deputy Charles Mercer. I've worked for the West Homo County Sheriff's Office for 17 years. I've seen drunks, meth heads, even the occasional fugitive. But I'd trade all of them in a heartbeat for what I saw that night on the Jenkins Ranch. It started with a call about dead cattle, 3 heifers, found just before sunrise by old Hank Jenkins, a rancher whose family's owned that patch of scrubland since before the Dust Bowl. Hank wasn't the type to panic. Hard as boot leather and twice as stubborn. So when he called dispatch sounding shaken, I paid attention. I arrived around 6:45 a.m. The sun hadn't fully broken the horizon yet, just painting the fields in that dusty amber haze. Hank was waiting by the gate, pale under his straw hat, one hand holding a thermos that was shaking a little too much for a man like him. "They ain't right," he muttered as I stepped out of my cruiser. "Ain't no coyotes did this." He led me out to the pasture. What I saw made my stomach drop. 3 cows sprawled in the dirt, their bodies torn open. Not eaten, opened, like something had been studying them. There wasn't a drop of blood on the ground. Their eyes were gone, their jaws dislocated, tongues missing. The incisions looked surgical, like someone or something had known exactly where to cut. I crouched down, snapped a few pictures with my phone. "You move anything?" Hank shook his head. Not a damn thing. Just stood here waiting. But I did hear something last night. Big, heavy, walking near the shed after midnight. Figured it was just deer till the dog started acting up. Then I heard it growl. I frowned. You sure it was a growl? Could have been a feral hog. He met my eyes. I know what pigs sound like, Deputy. This was deeper, like it came from a well. I didn't know what to make of it. Part of me wanted to write it off. Coyotes can get creative and ranchers love a good, spooky story. But the unease in Hank's voice was real. I filed a report, promised to send a wildlife officer to follow up, and headed back to the station. That should have been the end of it. But it wasn't. 2 nights later, we got another call from the Riggs farm, 15 miles down the highway. Same story. Dead livestock. No blood, clean cuts. No tracks, and the same thing kept coming up. Something in the dark. Watching. Walking. By the 4th call, I was losing sleep. These weren't just predators. Something was toying with these people. Hunting without feeding. Marking territory. And then it got worse. It started watching the homes. Mrs. Alvarez, an elderly widow out near County Road 12, reported seeing something tall standing at the tree line behind her house. Said it stared for 15 minutes, never moved, never blinked. Then it was gone. And on the 8th night, it came for me. It was 1:22 a.m. I'd just finished a welfare check and was on my way back home when I passed the old wind farm out past Harlan Mesa. My cruiser's headlights flickered for a second. Thought it was the battery. Then the engine sputtered and died. I coasted to the shoulder, cursed under my breath, grabbed the radio. Dispatch, this is Unit 4. I'm out by Harlan Mesa. Cruiser just died on me. Can you send? Then I heard it breathing from the tree line on the passenger side. Slow, deep, rhythmic, like something enormous was crouched just beyond the reach of the headlights. I froze. It moved. First just a shape, black against black. But as it stepped forward, the light caught its outline. I'll never forget it. Tall, maybe 9 feet, upright, shoulders like fence posts, arms too long, hanging low with claws that curled like knives. The head was like a wolf's but broader, the eyes glowing, not reflective, glowing, amber, intelligent, predatory. We stared at each other. I couldn't breathe, couldn't blink. Then it smiled. Not with its mouth, with its eyes. It stepped closer, and I swear to God it raised one hand like it was going to tap on the window. I fumbled for my pistol. The lights flickered. It vanished. Not ran, vanished, like smoke. The engine roared back to life. I floored it. Didn't stop until I hit the sheriff's office, tires squealing into the lot. I must have looked like hell, pale, sweating, gun still clutched in one hand. The chief thought I'd had a breakdown. I didn't argue. The next day, I tendered my resignation. People still call me about strange howls, about livestock found gutted, about shadows at their windows. I don't go out there anymore. That thing isn't just hunting animals. It's studying us, learning, waiting, and somewhere out in those empty fields and mesquite groves of West Hollow County, it still watches, still walks, still smiles that silent, knowing grin. If you ever find yourself driving the back roads of Texas late at night and your headlights flicker near a stand of trees, don't stop. Don't look. And if something steps out of the shadows to watch you drive by, keep driving, because if you look too long, it might follow. My name's Trevor Miles. I'm 42 now, but back when this happened, I had just turned 30. I'd taken a temporary job as a maintenance contractor for a grain elevator company that serviced rural sites across the Dakotas. These were old silos, most built in the 50s and 60s, and every year they sent crews to inspect, repair, or dismantle the ones too far gone. This particular site was in Harding County, South Dakota. Closest town was a little spot called Buffalo, less than 400 people. The grain elevator itself stood about 6 miles out, surrounded by nothing but wind-stripped fields and a dense tree line that cut in tight from the northwest. 4 silos, 1 grain leg tower, and a control shack that hadn't seen proper use in over a decade. They sent me out alone, which wasn't supposed to happen, usually a 2-man job at minimum. But a snowstorm had grounded most of the other techs, and I'd already made the drive. The job was simple. Climb the leg tower, photograph the corrosion, and log any safety hazards for demolition approval. It started strange. There was a dog, just standing at the edge of the tree line when I pulled in. Big thing, German Shepherd or maybe a Malamute, I thought, but it didn't move, just stared. Its silhouette caught in the rear view like a glitch in the frame. I went about my business, unlocked the control shack, powered up my equipment, ran diagnostics on the grain leg. It wasn't until I stepped outside again to do a perimeter check that I realized something was off. The wind had stopped, dead still. That flat prairie silence you only get before a blizzard or something worse. That's when I noticed the prints. Massive clawed tracks in the snow, bipedal. The stride was long, maybe 5 feet between impressions, and they circled the silo complex in a wide arc. Not a single set, multiple, 3 or 4, maybe more. My first thought was some kids playing a prank with snowshoes or fabricated tracks, but these weren't stamped. They were sunk deep, weighted. I took photos, because it felt like one of those moments where proof might be important later. When I climbed the legged tower, it was with that familiar chill on the back of the neck, the kind you can't shake, the kind that says something is watching. From 120 feet up, I could see across the plains for miles, except for the woods. The trees looked darker than they should have, even with the midday sun cutting through the clouds. That's when I saw it. A figure moved along the edge of the tree line, on all 4s at first, black, almost fluid in motion. Then it rose, slowly, upright. It was tall, 8 feet at least, but lean. Too lean. The limbs were long. The arms reached below the waist and ended in hands, not paws. It turned slightly, just enough for me to see the eyes. Amber, reflective even in the light, like they generated their own glow. I backed down the ladder, hands shaking. At the bottom, I called it in to my supervisor. "There's something out here," I said. He laughed it off. "Cougar? Bear?" "No," I said, quieter now. "No, this isn't. It's not an animal." It stood up. The call dropped. I wasn't alone anymore. From the base of the grain leg, I could hear breathing. Long exhales, wet, guttural. It was coming from inside the nearest silo. One of the old ones, its hatch warped from years of rust and sun damage. I approached carefully, flashlight drawn. My boots crunched the gravel, but otherwise the world had gone completely silent again. Then the hatch moved, not swung open, just flexed. Something pushed against it from inside, slow, controlled, testing. I took one step back, then another. The hatch suddenly blew open. Something came out low and fast, blurring across the gravel, scraping claws echoing like knives on pavement. I dropped my flashlight and ran. I didn't think. I just sprinted toward the shack, heart hammering, lungs burning. I slammed the door behind me, locked it, backed into the far wall. The creature didn't follow me in. It didn't need to. It began circling the shack. I heard the claws tapping on the outer walls. Once, twice. Then silence. Then a slow, dragging scrape, like fingernails on a chalkboard. It paused at the window, and though I couldn't see it fully through the grime, I saw the shape, the height, the eyes, those goddamn glowing eyes. It stood there, watching. Then it crouched, head ducking just low enough to vanish from view. I waited. 30 minutes, an hour, maybe more. When I finally cracked the door open again, the tracks were gone. The prints in the snow? Erased. The only sign anything had been there was my fallen flashlight, half crushed and coated in drool. I left everything behind. Gear, tools, reports. I drove through a blizzard to get back to civilization. The company thought I had a breakdown. I didn't argue. I didn't go back. But I started watching the news. And over the next 2 years, I found 7 reports of similar sightings, each one near grain silos or remote industrial sites, always at the edge of old forest lines. Most were dismissed as misidentifications or tall tales from drunk locals. But I know better. I've seen them. And sometimes in the dead of winter, when the wind dies and the silence presses in, I hear them breathing again, long, slow, just outside the walls of wherever I am, waiting. My name is Ben Colton. I'm 39 now, but the events I'm about to tell you happened back in 2016. The summer I finally agreed to house sit my uncle's cabin in northern Georgia. It was tucked back in the woods outside a little ghost town called Larkspur Hollow, maybe 15 miles off the nearest paved road, surrounded by national forest, forgotten hunting trails, and not much else. I should have said no, but my Uncle Tom was the only family I had left, and when he asked me to look after the property while he underwent surgery in Atlanta, I didn't hesitate. Just feed the dog, walk the perimeter once a day, and don't worry about the woods. If something's out there, it usually keeps to itself. Usually. The cabin was beautiful in that warm southern way, rustic with a long front porch and a fire pit circled by mismatched chairs. There were sheds, a chicken coop, an old well he'd sealed up decades ago. Beyond the back fence was nothing but miles of dense pine and oak. A few game trails threaded through the brush, but Tom warned me not to follow any of them too far. "You'll get turned around real easy," he said. "These woods bend." I didn't know what he meant until later. At first, things were fine, peaceful even. His dog, Jasper, a mutt built like a wolfhound and lab mix, took to me immediately. Each night we'd sit on the porch, sipping beers. Well, I did, and listen to the frogs in the creek bed below the ridge. But around the fourth night, things began to shift. Jasper started growling at the trees. Not the casual, alert kind of growl either. This was deep, guttural, fur-raised, lip-curled kind of growling. The first time it happened, I assumed he'd caught scent of a bear or a coyote. But when I went for the spotlight to check, Jasper whined and backed into the house. I stood on the porch, sweeping the light over the tree line, and saw nothing. But I felt it. That pressure. Like standing in a room where someone's just gone silent behind you. The woods, which had been full of nighttime sounds, crickets, frogs, wind in the branches, were suddenly dead. I don't mean quiet, I mean lifeless. No wind, no sound. Just an oppressive, suffocating stillness that made my skin crawl. Then I heard it. A clicking, like claws tapping against wood, slow, methodical. It was coming from the back of the house, near the shed. I spun the spotlight and took a step off the porch, but Jasper barked, loud, sharp, urgent, and bolted in front of me, hackles raised like a ridge of steel wire. I didn't see what he saw, but the light caught something. Eyes, amber. High off the ground, maybe 7 or 8 feet up, watching me through the trees. The moment I locked on them, they vanished. Like something ducked. I didn't sleep that night. Next morning, I found scratches on the shed. 3 deep gouges, waist high, not bare marks, too straight, too clean. Like someone had dragged a hunting knife through the wood. I told myself it was nothing. Tree branches in the wind. Wood rot splitting. I didn't believe it, but I needed to pretend. 2 nights later, it came closer. I woke up around 3 a.m. to Jasper growling again, but this time it wasn't coming from the living room. He was in my bedroom, teeth bared, staring at the window. And the window was open. I know I'd locked it. The screen had been cut. I grabbed my uncle's shotgun from the closet, ran out to the porch, and scanned the tree line. Nothing, but that silence was back, heavy, pushing on my chest. And the feeling of being watched, of something leaning just beyond the reach of the porch light, was overwhelming. I didn't go back to bed. I sat in the kitchen with Jasper at my feet, the gun across my lap, eyes locked on the front door. Right before dawn, something tapped on the window behind me. Not a knock, a tap, light, deliberate, like it wanted me to know it was still there. That day I hiked the perimeter like Tom had asked me to do, but this time I brought the shotgun and Jasper, who wouldn't leave my side. We reached the back ridge where the creek cut through the woods, and that's when I found the footprints. Huge, longer than mine by half, with claw marks at the tips, bipedal. Whatever had walked through there had done so upright. The impressions were deep, spaced far apart like a runner's stride, but the weight distribution was wrong. The heels didn't sink. It was all toes and claws. We followed the trail for maybe 40 yards before Jasper stopped cold. Wouldn't move another inch. Tail between his legs, eyes locked on something in the brush I couldn't see. That's when I heard it again. The clicking. Only this time it was closer, directly ahead. And there was something else with it, a breathing sound. Low, wet, like someone exhaling through bloody water. I raised the gun and backed away slowly, never taking my eyes off the trees. I didn't run, not yet, but I felt like prey. That night was the worst. I was lying in bed, shotgun leaning against the nightstand, Jasper at my feet, when the smell hit me. Rot, wet fur, moldy wood and iron. It poured in through the open vent above the bed like smoke. Jasper started whining, pawing at the door, then barking frantically. I heard footsteps on the roof. Then something landed on the porch with a heavy thud. I shot up, grabbed the gun, and flipped the porch light on. The bulb burst, and in the brief flash before the glass exploded, I saw it, standing at the base of the steps, 8 feet tall, maybe more, covered in dark, matted fur, the head of a wolf, too long, too angular, with ears that twitched independently. The mouth hung half open, revealing rows of uneven yellow teeth. But the eyes, God, the eyes, they smiled. Not like a dog, not like a man, like something pretending to be both, something trying to mimic what it had seen on faces before it ripped them off. I slammed the door, bolted every lock, and sat with the gun in my lap until sunrise. When Tom came home 3 days later, I tried to play it off. He didn't ask much, just stared at the scratches on the porch, ran a hand down one of the gouges in the shed, then nodded to himself like he'd seen it all before. That night he made us coffee, then poured a shot of whiskey into both our mugs and sat with me on the porch. "You heard the tapping?" he asked. I nodded. "You smelled it?" "Yes." He took a long sip and looked out at the trees. "It never comes through the door, not unless you open it." I moved out west not long after that, but I never stopped watching the trees. I never sleep with the window open, and if I ever hear tapping on the glass past midnight, my name is Isaac Rowe, and until last fall, I'd never believed in monsters. Not really sure. I'd heard the stories. My grandfather used to talk about creatures in the hills, back when I was just a kid, growing up in Tennessee. He'd sit on his porch with a corncob pipe and that old hunting rifle across his knees, talking about shadows that moved without sound, or eyes that watched from the trees, even when there was no wind. No animals, no reason to feel afraid except you did, deep down in your bones. He called them the hollow ones. I thought it was just a spooky story for keeping kids out of the woods. I don't think that anymore. This happened in October of 2022. My cousin Tyler and I had taken a long weekend to go bow hunting. We'd been planning it for months. He knew of a spot up in the Cumberland Plateau, far from any town, cell towers, or curious tourists, where the deer were thick and the woods still felt ancient. Said it was near a place locals called Widow's Bend. I should have known from the name alone. The cabin was old, but well kept. His uncle's place, apparently, though we never saw the man. Tyler just had the keys. One long gravel road, 2 locked gates, and 5 miles from the nearest neighbor. It was perfect, or at least it should have been. Our first 2 days were uneventful. We hiked the ridge, set up 2 stands, and scouted some trails near a dry creek bed. The air had that crisp, electric bite to it that only comes in autumn. Leaves underfoot, birdsong overhead, Everything felt peaceful. But that changed on the third night. It started with the silence. You hear people say that all the time, but you don't really understand what they mean until it happens. One second we were sitting by the fire, listening to owls in the trees and the wind in the branches, and the next, nothing. No bugs, no frogs, no wind, like the woods had been vacuum sealed. Just the crackle of our fire and the sound of my own breathing. Then Jasper, Tyler's coonhound, started growling, low, uneasy. His ears flattened. His body went stiff. Tyler looked up from cleaning his broadheads. "You hear that?" "No," I said, but I knew what he meant. We both stood and looked out into the trees. There was movement. Not loud, not careless, just deliberate. Like something wanted us to hear it. Low footsteps crunching leaves, a branch creaking. Then the footsteps would stop and start again on the other side, circling. Jasper started barking, full-throated and wild, snapping at the dark. I grabbed the lantern and swept it toward the tree line, and for half a second I thought I saw something tall, too tall. I didn't get a good look, just a flash of fur. A glint of amber eyes that didn't reflect light. They held it, like two hot coals floating in the dark. Then it was gone. We spent that night inside with the shotgun out and the fire burning low. Jasper wouldn't stop pacing. Every time he passed the window, he'd freeze, stare out into the trees, and whimper. It came back the next night. Only this time it wasn't just watching. It screamed. You ever hear a mountain lion? This wasn't that. This was deeper, longer, like a woman crying and a wolf howling at the same time, played backward on a broken record. It shattered something in me, made my hands shake. My stomach turned to ice. Tyler stood in the corner, pale as a sheet, holding the shotgun so tight I thought it might snap in half. The scream came again. Closer. We didn't sleep. When dawn finally came, we found the deer stand, Tyler's, torn apart. Not broken, shredded. Steel steps twisted, cables frayed. Something had torn it down from the tree and slammed it into the ground hard enough to bury the frame 6 inches into the dirt. There were claw marks in the bark, deep, long, spaced too wide for any bear, too deliberate. Tyler wanted to pack up right then and there, but I convinced him to stay one more night. I don't know why. Pride, maybe. Or maybe I just needed proof I wasn't going crazy. I got it. That night I heard it climb onto the roof. The whole cabin creaked under the weight. Shingles scraped, wood groaned. Then it moved to the porch. We turned out the lanterns and sat there in the dark, hearts pounding, Jasper shaking like a leaf. Then it tapped on the window 3 times, tap, tap, like it had fingers. Then it laughed. I can't describe the sound. It wasn't human. It wasn't animal. It was like a child trying to mimic a laugh after only hearing it once. Like it knew what laughter was, but didn't understand why we did it. Tyler ran for the truck. I followed. Jasper bolted ahead like a streak of lightning. We didn't even grab our gear. I don't remember unlocking the gate. I don't remember the road. Just to look on Tyler's face as we barreled down the mountain with the brights on and the trees flashing past us like prison bars. We didn't talk much after that. Not for months. Fire inspectors found the well cap ripped off and shattered 50 yards from where it had been cemented in place. He asked me if I remembered what Grandpa used to say about the hollow ones. about things older than the forest that never died, just waited. I remembered, and now I think he was telling the truth all along. I worked nights as a security patrol officer for a construction company that leases heavy equipment to sites all over western Pennsylvania. It's mostly boring work, driving from one yard to another, checking that no one's messing with the gear, logging a few photos, and moving on. That night I was scheduled for a loop out toward an old gravel quarry that had been shut down for years. The company recently started leasing space there, again for equipment storage. I'd done the run a couple times already and didn't love it. The road in was long, narrow, and poorly maintained, with woods pressing in tight on both sides. No lights, no nearby houses, just a gravel lot full of silent machines and shadows. I arrived around 2:40 a.m. The lot was quiet, the moon just peeking through cloud cover. I killed the engine and stepped out of the truck, boots crunching on the gravel. I logged my check-in, snapped a few pictures of the excavators and loaders, then walked the perimeter like I always did. That's when I noticed it. One of the newer bulldozers had these long scratches along the blade, not from use. These were deliberate, parallel grooves deep and spaced apart. I crouched down, shining my flashlight along the edge. Whatever made them had claws, not tools, and the marks were fresh, still flaking metal. I stood up and took a slow look around. The woods at the edge of the lot were silent, too silent. I chalked it up to maybe a bear, logged it, and started heading back toward my truck. That's when I heard it, the sound of something heavy stepping through underbrush. Not a deer, too slow, too purposeful. Then a low growl, deep and guttural, rolled out from the trees like thunder muffled in a blanket. I froze. The flashlight trembled in my grip as I aimed it at the tree line, catching nothing but bare trunks and bramble. Then a shape, just for a second, huge, low to the ground but not on all fours, watching. I backed up slowly toward my truck, trying not to panic. My keys were in my jacket. I reached for them, and that's when it stepped out of the trees. It moved like it had all the time in the world. At first I thought I was looking at some kind of upright bear, but bears don't move like that, don't stand like that. Its legs bent backward, joints popping unnaturally as it shifted. It was tall, at least 7 feet, and covered in dark matted fur, soaked around the shoulders like it had been standing in water. Its head was wolfish but wrong, too angular, too expressive. The eyes reflected orange in the flashlight beam, intelligent, cold, curious. It stopped at the edge of the gravel, sniffing the air like it was deciding if I was worth the effort. I took another step back. The creature cocked its head. Its lips curled just enough to show a line of pointed, glistening teeth. I ran. I don't remember unlocking the truck door or climbing inside. I just remember slamming it shut and jamming the key into the ignition. The headlights flicked on, and there it was, now at the center of the lot, crouched low like it had just bounded forward. It didn't chase me. It just stood there in my high beams, breathing heavy, steam curling from its nose, watching as I floored it in reverse and peeled down the narrow road like my life depended on it. because maybe it did. I didn't report it, not officially. Who would believe me? I said the scratches were from vandals and let it go. But I haven't been back to that quarry since. Someone else handles that route now. I've started hearing things, though. Drivers refusing to do the graveyard shift out near the ridge. Equipment getting damaged in ways no one can explain. Tools missing. Deep claw marks left on machines we keep locked behind fences. Sometimes I think I should have done more. Reported it. Told someone higher up, but then I remember those eyes. That moment it chose not to chase me. It could have, and I think maybe it let me go. But not because it was done with me. No, because it wanted me to know. I've lived most of my life in East Texas, and I know what the woods are supposed to sound like. You grow up in a place like this. You learn the rhythms, cicadas in the summer, owls at night, the distant yip of coyotes cutting through the pine thickets after dark. Silence, real silence, that's what tells you something's wrong. It was early November when it happened. I was working for the county on a part-time maintenance crew, mostly water management stuff, inspections, meter checks, clearing debris near the reservoirs. The kind of work that's boring but predictable. I liked it. Until that day. The job was simple. Check the telemetry unit on an old water tower about 20 miles outside of town. It was tucked back off an overgrown service road behind a stretch of undeveloped timberland. Just me, a packed lunch, and the truck's AM radio humming gospel tunes through the static. The sun was out. Everything felt normal. Until I got there, right away I noticed something strange. No birds. Not a single chirp. Not even the usual buzz of bugs near the scrub brush. The whole place felt hushed, like someone had sucked the sound out of the air. I parked under the shadow of the tower, grabbed my clipboard, and stepped out into the quiet. The tower was one of those old welded steel jobs, narrow legs and a rusted cylinder on top. It hadn't been replaced because it still functioned, barely. County just wanted someone to check the pressure sensor and make sure no critters had chewed through the wiring. About halfway through the inspection, I found the claw marks. I was kneeling near one of the support beams, trying to follow a conduit line when I saw them. 4 deep gouges in the metal, low to the ground, about a foot long and spaced apart like fingers. Not cat claws. Not even bare. These were longer, deeper. Like something had gripped the steel. I stood up and looked around. The clearing stretched maybe 100 yards in every direction before the tree line swallowed it up. Tall pines, brittle oaks. No movement. No wind. I suddenly felt watched. Now, I'm not a superstitious guy. I've hunted, camped, tracked hogs through these woods at 3 a.m. in the rain. But that day, something felt off. I packed up my tools and decided to finish the paperwork back in the truck. That's when I heard it crack. Not a twig, not a branch falling. A snap, sharp and close, from the tree line behind the tower. I turned around slow, scanning the shadows. Nothing, but I could feel it. You ever get that sensation that something's staring at you, like it's pushing its presence into your skull? I climbed into the truck, locked the doors, and sat there for a moment, just listening. Then the growl came, low, rattling, vibrating through the windshield like it was coming from beneath the earth. It came from the tree line. I turned the key. The truck hesitated, one of those half-turns where the starter stutters, and I felt my heart jump into my throat. Then the engine caught and roared to life. I threw it into reverse, turned, and got the hell out of there, gravel spinning under the tires. I didn't look back. At least, not then. I tried to write the whole thing off. Told myself it was probably a coyote or a wild dog or maybe just a trick of the light. But I couldn't get those claw marks out of my mind. I took a photo with my phone before I left and stared at it that night in bed, trying to rationalize it. I zoomed in, enhanced the contrast. There was no denying it. Whatever made those marks had fingers, long, thick fingers tipped with claws. I didn't sleep. 3 days later, I got a call from one of the other crew guys. Name's Dennis. Said he had a weird one for me. "You were out at Tank 6, right?" he asked. "Yeah, why?" "We found one of the deer feeders torn up about half a mile from there. Metal's bent like someone hit it with a sledgehammer, and there's blood everywhere, but no deer." "No tracks?" "Just weird ones. Kinda like hell, I don't know, man. Just come take a look." I met him that afternoon. The clearing where the feeders sat looked like something had exploded. The feeder pole was bent sideways, torn open at the base, and the ground was churned up like a rodeo had come through. Dennis pointed to the prints, wide, humanoid, but longer than a man's foot and sunken deeper into the soil than any barefoot human could manage. And then there was the smell. I don't know how to describe it. Wet fur, rotting meat, and a coppery tang like old blood. It clung to everything. That night, I didn't sleep again, and this time I heard something outside my house, not on the road, not in the woods, outside my bedroom window. A shuffle of dirt, a breath against the glass. I live alone out on a rural property at the edge of the county. No neighbors for a quarter mile. No dogs, no wind that night. But something was out there. I stayed frozen under the sheets until sunrise. I tried to tell the sheriff. He nodded, wrote something in a little notepad, told me he'd keep an eye out for any predators. But I could see in his face he didn't believe a word. Hell, I don't blame him. But 2 nights later, something attacked the livestock pen behind the Miller farm. 8 goats, all torn apart. The fence shredded like paper, and they found claw marks, same kind, same depth, on the metal gate. You want to hear the worst part? There was a trail leading away from the pen, straight toward Tank 6. I went back. Yeah, I know. Call it stupid, call it curiosity, call it needing to know. I took my rifle, 2 flashlights, and a trail cam, parked half a mile away and hiked in before sunset. I waited until dark, found a spot behind an old log near the water tower and stayed completely still. The air was thick. The silence was worse than before. Then just after midnight I saw it. It stepped out of the trees like it owned the place. Tall, maybe 8 feet. Broad shoulders, long arms that nearly brushed its knees. Covered in fur, dark and coarse, and glinting in the moonlight like wet moss. The head was unmistakably canine. Elongated snout, pointed ears, wide mouth that curled back in a sneer of teeth. But the eyes, God, the eyes, they were human. Not just intelligent, aware, it moved with purpose. stalking the perimeter of the tower like it was guarding it. Then it paused, sniffed the air, and looked straight at me. I didn't move. It stepped closer, closer. The air turned to ice. My muscles locked. I couldn't even lift the rifle. I swear for a second I felt it inside my head. Not like reading my mind, more like it was feeling me, measuring me, judging whether I was a threat or not. Then it blinked. And it smiled. I swear to God, it smiled. Not an animal grin, something else, something mocking. Then it turned and disappeared into the trees, silent as smoke. I've never been back to that tower. I turned in my resignation. 2 days later, no explanation. Dennis understood. He's since put in for transfer. Whatever that thing is, it's still out there. I don't think it's a random creature. I think it's guarding something, watching something. Maybe the water tank is just part of its territory. Maybe it's older than the tower, older than the town. Maybe it's just been. If you ever find yourself alone in the woods and everything suddenly goes quiet, no birds, no bugs, no wind, leave. Don't investigate. Don't look back. Don't try to explain it. Because some things out there don't belong to the world we understand. And one of them is watching that rusted tower off Route 54, waiting for anyone dumb enough to get too close. I still dream about those eyes, every single night. And in the dream, they're always getting closer. I'm not going to tell you my full name. You can call me Rick. I served 22 years in the U.S. Army, most of that time as a reconnaissance specialist. That means I was the guy they dropped into the woods first, usually alone, with nothing but a rifle, a pack, and orders to watch. I was trained to notice patterns, track movement, survive off the land, and disappear without a trace. I saw a lot during my time war, yes, but also things that don't make it into the reports. After I retired in 2011, I settled down near Tahoe, up in the Sierra Nevadas. Quiet place, good folks, plenty of forest. I built a cabin about 6 miles from the nearest road, off-grid, solar-powered, surrounded by pine, and with nothing but my dog, a Belgian Malinois named Jasper, to keep me company. That was my peace. No neighbors, no noise, just the wind, the trees, and the mountains, until 2014. That was the year I stopped sleeping through the night. It started with the sounds. Around October, Jasper began acting jumpy after dusk. He's a fearless dog, ex-military like me, trained in combat zones and used to gunfire. But something about the woods around the cabin made him uneasy. He'd sit by the door at night, ears rigid, lips pulled back in a silent snarl, like he was waiting for something to come through the wall. And I mean every night. Always between 2 o'clock and 4 o'clock a.m. At first, I assumed it was a bear. Black bears aren't uncommon up here, and they'll come sniffing around if they think you've left food out. But this was different. No scratch marks on the trees. No upturned garbage. No tracks I could identify. Just broken branches, tufts of fur I couldn't classify. And this god-awful smell. Imagine wet dog mixed with blood and moldy meat left in the sun. That smell would linger just outside the cabin, then vanish by morning. Jasper wouldn't go outside at night anymore. He'd just sit there, shaking and growling low. So I set up trail cams. Military-grade stuff, infrared, heat sensors, all of it. I positioned them around the property, high up, with wide angles. And for 2 nights, nothing. Just deer, raccoons, a fox or two. Then night 3 hit. I woke to the alarm around 2:37 a.m. Jasper was already pacing, whining. I grabbed the monitor and froze. Something was standing just inside the tree line. I say something because no human I've ever seen has eyes like that. The camera didn't catch detail, just heat, but the shape was all wrong. It was hunched, with long arms that almost touched the ground, and a head too narrow to be a bear. Its body temp registered colder than expected, like it shouldn't have been alive at all. It moved fast, too fast, from one side of the frame to the other in half a second. I grabbed my rifle, threw on boots, and stepped out into the cold. Jasper stayed inside. The forest was dead silent. No wind, no bugs, no owls. Just me and that creeping dread crawling up my spine. I swept the perimeter, night vision on, and that's when I heard it. Crunch. Something stepped on dry pine needles just 20 yards ahead. Then again, crunch, snap. I raised my rifle. "Come on out," I called. "You're trespassing on private land. I'm armed." Nothing. Then a deep growl rumbled from the shadows. Not a bear growl, lower, almost wet, like something was growling through a throat full of blood. It hit me square in the chest. I've faced insurgents with RPGs, and I've never felt fear like that. I fired a warning shot into the ground. The growl stopped. But the thing didn't run. It started moving slow, deliberate steps around me. I kept the rifle trained ahead, but I could hear the footfalls circling. I backed toward the cabin. That's when I caught a glimpse of it through the trees. 7 feet tall at least, walking on 2 legs, arms swinging unnaturally long. Its fur was patchy and dark, like someone had sewn together parts of a wolf and a man, and then left it to rot. Its snout was too short for a canine, but the teeth, Jesus. I saw those teeth flash in the moonlight, crooked, jagged, yellow. The thing was grinning at me. I didn't fire again. I didn't run. I did what instinct told me. I broke line of sight and retreated to the cabin. I know how predators work. When they watch, they're learning. I wasn't going to give it another show. Back inside, I locked every bolt, covered the windows, and sat up all night with Jasper curled against my legs like a puppy. The cams were shredded the next morning. Every single one ripped clean off the tree. One had claw marks 6 inches deep gouged into the bark. I called a friend, a buddy from my recon unit, who now works with wildlife conservation. I told him everything. He didn't laugh. He told me stories from the Rockies, Appalachia, parts of Alaska. Same kind of descriptions, tall, upright, canine-looking things that stalk people in remote areas. Sometimes alone, sometimes in pairs. Always just out of reach, always watching. He called them runners. I asked why. "Because if you see one," he said, "you run." I packed up that weekend and moved back into town. I still go out to the mountains, but not alone, never at night, and never near that cabin. I sold it to some tech guy from the Bay Area, young kid. seemed excited to rough it. I didn't say a damn thing. Maybe that makes me a coward. Maybe not. But here's what I know. That thing is still out there, watching, waiting. And if you ever find yourself out in those woods in the dead hours of night and the forest suddenly goes quiet, don't turn on your flashlight, don't speak, and don't stop moving. I'm not the kind of guy who believes in monsters. Never was. I'm a father, a history teacher, a pretty average dude. 42 years old, married for 12 of those, 2 kids, decent job, a backyard grill, the whole deal. I live in the Hudson Valley, not far from the Catskills. I hike on the weekends. That's my peace, me, a trail, and some quiet away from the world. No emails, no lesson plans, no screaming kids. This happened in September of 2021. The leaves were just starting to turn that red-orange shimmer you only get up here before the air really starts to bite. I decided to check out a less traveled path near Pikamoose, something I'd found on a hiker's forum marked as unofficial but scenic. That's the first mistake I made. The second was going alone. The trail was overgrown but manageable. Old logging road, judging by the cuts in the hill and how the trees curved unnaturally away from the center. No cell reception after the first mile, but that's normal out there. I had gear, water, a folding knife, my headlamp. I wasn't some greenhorn out here trying to play survivalist. About an hour in, I noticed the smell. Like wet leaves and rotting meat, strong, sudden, and wrong. It wasn't just decay. It was chemical, acidic, made the inside of my nose burn. I figured maybe a dead deer was off trail. Happens sometimes. I kept walking. That's when I found the scratches. They were deep, real deep, carved into the bark of a sugar maple, not bare scratches. I've seen those. These were higher, thicker, more deliberate. Parallel, maybe 4 inches apart, dug so deep you could fit your fingers in them. And they weren't old. There were more trees like that up the path, bent branches, torn bark. Patches where the moss had been scraped off the rock like something had dug its claws in to climb or stop a slide. But what really got me was the silence, no birds, no wind, just the sound of my boots and my own breath. That's when I heard the whistle. 3 notes, low, slow, repeating. At first I thought it was another hiker, maybe calling a dog. But then it came again, same tone, same rhythm, like it was mimicking the sound, not making it. I stopped cold, heart pounding, and turned to look behind me. Nothing, just forest. I started back down, fast. Then I heard it behind me, crunch, crunch, pause, like heavy footfalls trying to match my steps. I stopped. So did it. Hello? I called out. Nothing. Then, from the trees ahead, same whistle, same pattern, but this time it came from a different direction. I moved. Quickly. Branches started to snap behind me, louder now. Whatever it wasn't trying to be quiet anymore. It was moving fast, through brush, over rock, and catching up, I broke into a jog. Then a sprint. There's a part of the trail that slopes steeply down before hitting the stream. I hit it hard, barely keeping my footing, nearly rolled my ankle on a slick rock, and that's when I saw it. Down across the water in the trees opposite me, tall, Wrong. Gray-black fur. Long arms dangling low, almost to its knees. I thought it was a bear at first, but no bear sits like that. And no bear has a head shaped like that. Long, angular, with ears like a German shepherd, pointed and alert. Its chest was huge, heaving slowly, like it had just run miles without breaking a sweat. But the worst part, it was smiling, not snarling, smiling, wide, teeth like broken glass. I didn't move. I couldn't. Then it stood up, 7 feet, 8 maybe, towering, lean, bones under skin like rebar under concrete, and it whistled. 3 notes, the same exact pattern I'd heard before. It was toying with me. I turned and ran faster than I ever have in my life. I didn't look back, not once. I tore through the woods, got cut on branches, rolled through brush, and busted my knee on a fallen log, but I didn't stop until I saw my car through the trees. When I got inside and slammed the door, I didn't even start the engine right away. I just sat there, breathing like I'd run a marathon. My shirt was soaked, my hands were shaking, and as I reached for the key, I caught something in the rearview mirror. Movement. In the tree line, a dark figure watching, still, silent. I started the engine and floored it. Didn't stop until I was back on the highway. I didn't tell anyone at first. What would I say? That a monster stalked me in the woods and whistled a song? But I started researching, and I found the stories. Whistling in the forest. Creatures that aren't bears. Things with human eyes and dog faces. Dogman, they call it. I still hike, but I stay on the main trails now. I carry a sidearm and a flare, and I don't go out past 4 p.m. in those woods. There's something real out there. I saw it, heard it, smelled it, and I'll tell you this much, in case you're ever out there and you hear 3 whistles in the dark. Don't answer back.